You are at war with yourself and likely don't realize it. Your thoughts, beliefs, habits, and actions often sabotage you. Are they helping you overcome adversity or setting you up for failure? To win this battle, you must connect with your inner warrior. We all have a warrior within us, one that strengthens our resolve and helps us to rise to meet life's challenges. If you're just surviving rather than thriving, then it's time to embrace the warrior archetype, live the warrior ethos, and ascend. If you are a veteran, first responder, or someone looking to take charge of your life, find your tribe, and then be the hero of your own story, this podcast is for you. Join Mike Kinney and Matt Hastings, two retired U.S. Army officers who served in U.S. Army Special Operations and Army Aviation units, as they share with you optimal performance practices they learned in their time with the Military and Warriors Ascent, a 501c3 nonprofit that helps veterans and warriors with PTS.
Well, hello, everyone, and welcome to the Warriors Ascent podcast. I'm Mike Kinney. I'm accompanied by Matt Hastings. We are two career Army veterans, and we're here to talk about the warrior archetype and warrior ethos. So the purpose of this podcast for our audience is to help people reconnect with their inner warrior archetype and live the warrior ethos as an avenue to empowerment and ownership in order to live joyous, fulfilling, and purposeful lives. So our mission is to catalyze the rise of the warrior archetype in society. It's our contention that, quite frankly, we're losing touch with the warrior. And it's our purpose here is to help people reconnect with the warrior that resides in each one of us. And that's a source of strength. It's a source of overcoming obstacles. And we feel that it's exceedingly important to not lose connection with that. Our philosophy is that life is a series of heroes' journeys, obstacles to overcome, and missions to accomplish. The warrior archetype and the warrior ethos empower you to persevere. Along those lines, the virtues that we feel represent the essence of this philosophy are prudentia, fortitudo, and gravitas in Latin. So prudentia, prudent judgment, reasoning, and decisive action. So we'll say quality of thought, right? Fortitudo, fortitude, grit, perseverance, and discipline. So the ability to persevere, tenacity, grit. And then lastly, gravitas, which translates into gravity, but really means commitment, seriousness, virtue, dignity, and solemnity. So in the end, it's really being committed to the warrior and your purpose and your goal and overcoming obstacles. Our motto, Vincit qui se vincit, translates into he conquers who conquers himself. And that's important because before you can embark on life's journeys, overcome obstacles and challenges, you first need to conquer yourself. And you've got to do your own work in order to persevere. So I'll say for our part, our experience both in our Army careers and then also at our time at Warriors Ascent, a 501c3 nonprofit organization that helps veterans and first responders with post-traumatic stress, we really do focus on that notion of doing your self-work, self-care, and making sure that you're showing up as your most powerful self so that when you are interacting with others, that you're showing up as your best self. So with that said, I'll say establish some bona fides. As I've mentioned, I'm Mike Kinney. I'm a career military officer, graduated West Point in 1993, and I spent a career in the infantry with 101st Airborne Division Air Assault, 3187 Infantry, and 1st Special Forces Group. My last stint was at the Command and General Staff College as an instructor in the School of Advanced Military Studies. After my retirement from this service in 2015, after 22 years, I took the helm of a then fledgling nonprofit in Warriors Ascent, again, a 501c3 organization that helps veterans and first responders with post-traumatic stress. I'd like to say that we empower our participants to take ownership of their lives and healing. And we do so with a 5-day program that teaches our students and participants the tools to heal and tend the mind, body, and soul. So a holistic program, very effective. Look in the show notes and you'll see an article, an APA article that explicates our approach and the efficacy of the program. But that Warriors Ascent is where Matt and I met, and that's where we came into each other's orbit. And with that said, I'll introduce Matt, and he can tell his story as well.
Well, Mike, thanks for hosting me here and allowing me to be a co-host with you. Like we mentioned, we met at Warriors Ascent, where I went looking for a little bit of help, and you were the executive director. So it's pretty cool and an honor to be sitting here as a co-host upon becoming an alumni of that great retreat and cohort that I was in about 1 year ago. And it's kind of crazy to say, we talk about journeys and finding myself needing the services of Warriors Ascent. Started out, I had a career that ended up as being a Chief Warrant Officer for, Black Hawk helicopter pilot, Chief of Standardization of the Combat Aviation Brigade, which is just to say that was a giant organization, about 3,000 people. We had probably 100 aircraft, hundreds of millions of dollars worth of equipment, people, experts. And my job was to make sure that all those people were doing the right things so we could get the mission done first, and so that we could get the mission done safely and bring everybody home. So talk about gravitas, Mike. That was something that I didn't mess around when I was signing somebody's name that they were qualified to fly a Black Hawk and land into the desert night. Looks like the surface of the Mars. It might as well be. And when I say you're qualified to do that with 11 door kickers and 4 crew members, I got to make sure that's real. I started out flying as a young kid, flying before I could drive. And this led me into becoming this Army aviator. I didn't know how to be a combat aviator, but I was lucky enough to get selected as a civilian through a crazy program into the Warrant Officer Training Program, where I eventually made my way to 101st Airborne, which, as you know, that's the Mac Daddy. That's the big leagues right there of air assault operations.
That's right, Screaming Eagles, baby.
Helicopters, Screaming Eagles. Lots of helicopters. I got to be the flight lead of 101 aircraft in the sky at one time. We always like to do that. It was just kind of a thing. So we'd say it's the biggest air assault since the last biggest air assault. I got to take my skills to the instructor pilot course and then off to Germany to be a brand new instructor pilot, where my time in Germany was kind of short because we suddenly had to go visit Saddam Hussein in Baghdad, take him out a little bit. So that was a long 15 months in a very austere environment, living in the Baghdad airport, living in really bad conditions, flying tough missions with little resources, really, and doing a hard job seeing a lot of different weird combat situations, a lot of shoot downs during that time, missile systems. Going back home, instead of being a joyous thing, it was an overwhelming thing. It was a shock to me. I tried really hard to fake my family and myself out, right, for a long time. And, the only way I could really cope was with sticking it out in the Army and working harder and harder and harder and caring more about the other people and trying harder because we couldn't fail. Eventually, I visited Iraq 2 more times for a combined 3.5 years of my life doing this stuff. And, you're not going to be the same person when you return. You're just not. And one of the things that got me was just seeing other people and how I didn't feel like they cared. Like, what are you doing? Like, you don't even care that we have people dying in Afghanistan and Iraq right now for you and for your ability to go to have a burger and see what's on the movie theater. And nobody seems to even care. So I would get very upset about it. And instead of just being upset, I decided to just isolate. And I think that's a common thing. I didn't know this. I just stayed away from people. And that's no life, right? And eventually blew up another marriage, which I just didn't see that one coming. I had so many guardrails I thought in place to prevent a second one, and it just didn't work. I wasn't seeing what was happening apparently, which is what led me, to come to Warriors Ascent and say, how is this 5-day retreat going to change me? Well, sometimes you just have to be at that point where you just have to try, and that's kind of where I was.
Just trust the process.
I had to trust the process. I had to have a buddy talk me for the 2-hour drive all the way to make sure I didn't turn around. And when I got there, I saw a bunch of pretty tough looking customers, and nobody wanted to really be there. Nobody really wanted to talk. But boy, we found out pretty quickly that we all had the same story. The variables were different, the pictures looked different, but it was the same dang common theme. And when gentlemen would sit there and say these horrible things about themselves, I could just, no, it's not the truth. You were this. You've done so many things. You've faced adversity. You've been resilient. You've fought courage. You're selfless. All these great qualities in there. And then eventually it's like, well, why can't you see that about yourself? So, it's a tough realization. And I think that there's a lot of people that aren't willing to take that step. But when they are, they're going to find you're definitely not alone. In fact, like I said, I left the Army in 2016, and boy, did it get quiet quick.
You lose your tribe.
Tribe's gone. Purpose goes away. Or your purpose is now so, I'm going to say the word boring, or it's just so less impactful that it just doesn't feel like a real mission or a real purpose.
Yeah, you don't feel that motivation. It is nowhere near the impact. There's so much of us, I think, feel that, it's life or death. And as you pointed out, when you're certifying people, you in essence have your lives in your hands. You're saying that they're ready to go. All of your missions, all of that, very, very little else compares to that.
I would make sure that I always thought if my grandmother could get on the back of your aircraft and feel all right about it, then you're doing pretty good.
That's a tall.
My grandma was pretty tough though. So
yeah. No, man, I appreciate you sharing. I mean, I think really that lends a lot of context. I think so many people that are probably listening, I would imagine, feel a lot of the same things. And just to kind of recap, a lot of the things that we hear consistently from people that come to our program, and I would say one of the reasons that we're doing this podcast is to let people know, those that are listening, that they're not alone. They're not the only ones that feel this way. So it's that isolation. In some cases, it's that loss of tribe. We get veterans and first responders that have left the service. Sometimes it's a natural progression. Sometimes it's injury. It's not willingly. And when that identity is stripped from them, when their identity is so inextricably linked with who it is that they are in terms of as a professional, once that's stripped from them, it can be very unsettling. And we hear that time and again. So there's the identity, it's the purpose, it's the mission or lack thereof in some cases. Isolation, this notion that no one else understands, I've lost my tribe. It's the ethics, the virtues that we embraced in the military that we think are common to all, when in fact they're not. And we're very abruptly, presented that, upon our departure from the service. I feel, I think we've all felt that at one time or another. The other common things are, anxiety, some depression, lack of motivation, as you pointed out. It's kind of hard to get motivated for things when you were at the tip of the spear, at the pinnacle as a CW4. And, my experience in the 101st and first group, when we had a high-ranking CW4 at the controls, we knew we were in good hands. I mean, I'm not taking away from any of the lieutenants or anything like that, but you could tell a definitive difference. So I understand where you're coming from. In terms of just the time that you've put in. I mean, that's exceedingly commendable. Just very quickly, the warrior archetype, what we're getting at with this podcast, and as I think you've pointed out, is doing the hard stuff that you've done. I won't speak for myself, but the hard things that you've done, you had to embrace that warrior archetype to get through those hard times, which is absolutely instrumental. And in large measure, that's I'll say, the purpose of this podcast and what we're getting at. But at the same time, you also alluded to some issues that you were having, familial or what have you. And my contention, our contention here is, and we've said it multiple times at all the cohorts, and we've run 56 cohorts now over the last 7 years, helping 500 plus people, in many cases saving lives, and I'd submit to you all cases impacting lives. But what we hear time and again are I'll say the rifts or the friction that they have with family and coworkers. And what we'll say is the warrior archetype's exceedingly important. And I think what Jung called the warrior in his fullness. In other words, I'll call it the enlightened warrior, not the, hyper, kill, but the guy or the gal for that matter, because that warrior archetype resides in everybody. And it's what allows you to stand up in the face of adversity and to take on challenges and courage. But, it's been said, or we've said, you can't bring the warrior to every situation. And with all the military guys at the cohort, they all laugh when I say, you can't bring the knife hand. Okay, I need you to do this, and the kids need to get to school. And the wives bristle at that like, all right, I'm not one of your soldiers, So everyone chuckles knowingly like, oh yeah, I think I've done that. So it's like, hey, the warrior's important, but it needs to apply or be applied in the right situations. And you can't bring the warrior to every situation, although you need to maintain that connection. So can you speak to that, your experience with that?
Yeah, I think you're exactly right when you say, you're in a vehicle and I'm treating it like we're flying a Black Hawk and the whole crew has to do proper coordination. Clear right, Dad. You're at your return to right. And it's going to an airport. If you're not an hour early, you're 2 hours late. I'm early. I'm on time. I'm hyper vigilant. I got an escape plan, and I think it got very, very exhausting for my family.
That's right. TOT plus or minus 30 seconds.
Yeah,
right?
I mean, this is something I am, not something I do for a paycheck. And I think that became, that's different. And then we have lots of different kinds of veterans and warriors out there that serve different amounts of times and takes this differently. But, like you can't treat your family like they're your crew or they're your soldiers. You have to know, okay, hey, look, that was the hard part for me. I knew that at the beginning. It became difficult because my successes were when I was wearing that suit of armor. I called that flight suit, I put that thing on and people knew who I was and they didn't mess with me because I knew my stuff. I made them know their stuff, and I didn't care what rank they were. That didn't save them because they were a colonel. They had to answer, they had to fly, they had to do everything the same standard as a second lieutenant had to.
That's right, tough love.
Yeah, and that's why they employed guys like me, because I was supposed to be that barrier that could say straight to a colonel, no, that's wrong.
Absolutely.
And say same thing to a lieutenant, say, hey, sir, that's wrong. And not go, listen, because it was fun to mess with lieutenants.
Right.
It really just was.
Right.
But great humans. So when I realized that it's a success at work, but it's failure at home and in personal life. And you see it. You see guys going around all the time and being that senior non-commissioned officer, the sergeant, treating their family like it, and they mean well. They mean care and love, but it just comes across as tyrant, as controlling. And so I think that conflict is difficult. It was for me. I'm going to speak personally then. It was difficult for me because I was giving everything I had all the time. And at work, it was, everyone loved that, and it was rewarded. And at home, it was not. So what do? You spend more time at work.
That's right. We see it a lot.
Yeah, and so as we move forward, because that's what we always need to do, right? Is after action reviews of our lives, go, okay, let me see what I did wrong. Let me implement new strategies for a better outcome. And one of those is just conquering my own beasts, like we talked about. And then I feel like once I've done that, then I can start kind of helping out. And I don't want to be somebody's guru. What I will say is that, hey, this worked for me. I can't believe it worked for me. I went in there thinking, this is not going to work for me, people. I've tried this before. And all you're asking me to do is lay down on the floor and breathe really heavy. I mean, I can do that because I've done a lot of harder things, but I just don't see that working. And I'm going to tell you something. I'd love to be wrong when there's a solution. Because like you talk about, that there's actionable things that we walk away with that I get into a scenario and I go, I really need to conduct. Something's about to happen. I'm being triggered. I can feel my emotions going crazy and they're about to pop and I'm about to do something. I don't know what it is. And in the past, it's break things, it's throw things, it's whatever. But this time, you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to take a big, giant, deep breath, like oceanic deep breaths. And it's like, really? That's what you're going to do? Yeah, and the world slows down. Things start making sense. And I can say back to myself, all right, this is what we're going to do. Now, that guy felt like the CW4 that had the answers and solutions to all the problems. But this was just, that these can be just regular things. And I don't have to be military about it. I don't have to approach it. I can approach it as a human being saying, hey, this is a better idea.
Right. It's not so much a role as it is just
you can take a crisis and turn it into, a positive outcome. Mm-hmm. And the fact that happened with just breathing and, doing yoga and mindfulness, I don't want to take away from the other things because it's, and you'll see in the show notes, I really encourage anybody to go read this. American Psychological Association doesn't write about,
right. The APA
science.
Study, the article on the program that's forthcoming, lay out, a lot of what they call the multimodal approach, so that, for those that are interested, it's a good, I'll say, relatively in-depth study of the efficacy of the program, the approach that's used, and not to get too esoteric, but the statistically significant outcomes in various suicidality, anxiety, depression, and even risky drinking. So not to oversell it, but there's some real data and rigor behind it. But you as a beneficiary of that, I think can speak with enthusiasm and authenticity, right? No doubt. And clearly going forward with this podcast, we're going to, I'll say, explicate, some of that approach, in terms of this framework. So we talk about, fortitudo, prudentia, and gravitas, I'll say loosely correlated with, mind, body, and soul and the criticality of that. So getting your mindset right, various rubrics, whether they be cognitive, behavioral, metacognitive. Bottom line is, hey, thinking about your thinking, disciplining your thinking, and there's a variety of modalities that we use to get at that. The fortitude piece beyond the archetypical aspects of, hey, be tough and persevere. One might ask, well, where do I start? What do I need to do? But self-care, fitness, nutrition, a lot of things that people feel are, well, I don't have the time for that, or that's overindulgent, when in fact they're an absolute necessity. Absolutely.
That's that was kind of my thing. Or I think, there's a stereotype, which we try to get to. We talked about earlier today. We're trying to get to an archetype, not a stereotype. And we'll drop these stereotypes of masculinity being that, no, I can't take self-care. That means, right, having my hair done. No, it doesn't. It means, it means eating right. It means exercising properly. It means, meditating. It means, hey, journal.
That's right. To quote Stephen Covey, it's sharpening the saw.
Yeah. Set some intentions for your day tomorrow and knock those intentions out. Do it before you go to bed. Think about what I'm going to do tomorrow and make it happen. You start having these little victories and you start feeling victorious about stuff.
Nothing succeeds like success. Yep.
That's true.
No, absolutely. Absolutely. So, hey, bottom line, going forward, what you can expect from this podcast, right? You can accompany, myself and Matt on our own hero's journey, our lifelong hero's journey. And we've learned a lot, in our time in the military, our time at Warriors Ascent, and I've been there for 7 years, and Matt and I came into each other's orbit, at Warriors Ascent, and I think we've collectively learned a lot, and that's why we're here, to share a lot of the frameworks and the experiences, and I'll say the curriculum with everybody, who may benefit from it. But then even just life, we're two older dudes, not super old, but in our 50s, right? So, those life experiences. Similarly, I think, are beneficial and we're prepared to share as well. And that is, I'll say, the framework that will follow. So for those that, I hope will tune in and for whom maybe this has resonated, what you can expect in future episodes will be facets of our curriculum at Warriors Ascent, life lessons, mental frameworks, self-care practices. I'll say a multitude of tools that Matt and I have used and inculcated in our lives to have more purposeful, meaningful, and joyous lives. And we want to share that with everybody. But, we like to joke beyond for the military guys and gals out there, the bog sat, the bunch of guys or gals sitting around talking, right? We want this obviously to be more than that. We definitely want some of the anecdotal to make it real, to take these concepts that we may talk about, these frameworks, and make them real. But at the same time, what it is that we're really endeavoring to do is provide something actionable for everyone. And that way, at the end of every episode, it's something that you can use immediately to add value. So that is what it is that we're hoping to achieve with this podcast, over these next couple weeks, months, and hopefully, if we get enough support and interest, these next couple years. But that's what it is that we're looking to do. So again, to recap, embracing the warrior archetype, right, and living the warrior ethos as a way to live a joyous, prosperous, and fulfilling life. And our mission is, I'll say the rise of the warrior archetype, to re-embrace that. Because our contention is it's becoming lost. It resides in everyone, but our feeling is that it's become, I'll say, a vestige of a bygone era. And that is a mistake. That is a mistake to think that it's a quaint anachronism. It, in fact, is absolutely integral to people's personas, but it needs to be applied at the right times in people's lives. Therein lies the difference, please.
And can I say that, this podcast and the organization Warriors Ascent serve, first responders, EMS, fire, police, and Department of Corrections guys. And when I was there, we had all of that. And some of them expressed to me that they weren't sure they were going to blend well with veterans. And they did. They blended exactly the same situation, same feelings, same everything. One of the things that I mark differently is that a lot of those guys and gals are still out there serving their communities right now. And so I would invite all of them to be, part of our population to watch this and to come visit us and start the conversation with us about being a warrior, because we don't just mean veteran. We mean, I think you used the version of the mom at a soccer game and needing to stand up for little Johnny or something and bringing that warrior all of a sudden when it's necessary. So like everybody that wants to have this conversation, it's a good conversation for all of us. So don't forget that we have a lot of love for those serving our communities still to this minute. So I appreciate you allowing me to say that one more time. No,
that's a great clarification. I appreciate that. Yeah, so when we say the warrior and the warrior archetype, we don't mean, it's always combat or fighting fires or, firefights and stuff like that. It's that archetype empowers you to stand strong in the face of adversity. And that adversity could be anything from, taking an important test, as you said, the mother that advocates for her child in any capacity and has those uncomfortable conversations, conversations that she might not otherwise have. And that's what we're saying, is the ability to tap into that and seek strength from that. And, the cautionary tale is if we lose connection with that, you've got a meek and meager society that is not able to affect the change and the goals and the objectives that they so deeply desire. And that's disempowering. And we are about empowerment and ownership. So that's absolutely critical.
Excellent. I look forward to this, Mike.
No, I appreciate it. So, hey, everyone, if you got something out of this, I'd ask you to subscribe to our podcast, our YouTube channel, Facebook, and LinkedIn. See our website at www.warriotsascent.org for more information on our nonprofit and also to subscribe to our newsletter. And please, by all means, tune into our next podcast and everyone thereafter.
Hi, Matt Hastings here, sending a thank you for watching this episode of the Warriors Ascent podcast. You know, we strive to build a community of warriors made up of our nation's veterans and first responders. And to reach as many of those in need as possible, we need your help. Please just smash that like button and comment or share our content. Warriors Ascent is a Kansas City-based nonprofit that aids veterans and first responders with PTS. I went through this effective program and want those that are struggling to find what I found. Check us out on our website at warriorsascent.org.